This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Good evening. This is the City Council Ordinance meeting for April 28th, 2025. We're going to be discussing the zoning recommendations from the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. We have some meeting minutes to approve. Councilor Smith, you sent us meeting minutes from our meeting on April 14th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll take a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second.
If there's no further questions, I'll take all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. All right. So approved. Can you send those to Marianne?
Yes.
Great. So this evening, we're continuing our conversation. We've been moving through the report. I think we are now on section 5, creating flexible land use. So I believe that's where we left off, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh, we're farther
I thought
on,
we
sorry.
did section 5.
Yeah, we did. Sorry. I couldn't tell if those were my questions. So we
I
are,
think it's section 6.
yeah, I think 5, 6. Woo. So we're talking about section 6. So, oh, there we go. So I'm going to turn it over to the committee to kind of walk us through the next section. Does someone want to do that? Kayam, Ben, Jana? Everyone seems to be looking at Kayam on the screen. So.
Who did you do number 6 or Kaya?
Sure. Yeah, I can start with a little intro. Let me just kind of.
Oh, actually, before you do that, sorry, I forgot to mention, is there anyone who wants to say anything for public speak? Yep. All right, great. So please state your name and address.
Kathy Wazinski, Arnold Drive. I would first like to make a notation that it appears the meeting was moved without notice, which may have been an error at the city clerk's office, so I'll follow up on that. Secondly, I want to review a few of the things in some earlier sections where I had missed the meeting. I do believe the issues regarding the character of the community are really inappropriate to change. I do believe that we want to maintain the character of our rural community as much as possible without succumbing to an urbanization that this plan is pushing on the city. I do believe that this plan should be reviewed by other committees before it's moved forward to the city council, including the Aquifer Commission and the planning board. There are too many problems with this plan that have not been reviewed by experts in the areas that are responsible for them. And I would like to see this process stopped here at the ordinance committee so that other committees could review this. Thank you.
Great. And joined. Great. Great. Thank you for that. And also just to clarify, we are, when we set our next meeting, I will be inviting the Aquifer Protection Commission to the meeting to discuss their concerns about the recommendations. So that will happen once we find a couple of times that I can share with them for the next meeting. to address that. Again, I apologize that the meeting was changed to this location. There was communication with the clerk's office. We were kind of going back and forth because we were trying to find a smaller room, to be perfectly honest, because this feels a bit much. And also not everyone is visible on the screen, etc. So unfortunately, there was a meeting at 6 o'clock in the next in the room in conference room 1, but they need that room at 5:45, and so our schedules unfortunately were not able to be met. So I take responsibility for that. I apologize, but we did work with the clerk's office to make that change. So I will check in with her in the future about those changes. Anyone else for public speak? Okay, we're going to move on. So, sorry, Ben, back to you if you'd like to walk us through.
Do I need to talk into the mic or is it not that?
I don't even know if it's on. Is there a green light there?
No,
Press-
yeah,
press
press
the
the button.
There you go.
Yeah, and we're just going to do that so it's
Yeah.
easier to
Okay.
hear from the.
So yeah, thank you. I think maybe last meeting we did touch on section 6 because I'm looking through it. I feel like it looks like some stuff familiar we talked through, but I think if we want to like really focus on that section, kind of that would be good and do a little refresher. I think the goal for section 6, or at least the overarching goal, is basically if you look at what is built today in Easthampton, what exists on the ground today, if we're talking about the existing conditions, what we have, the zoning does not match that. And so that's the issue, is that you can't legally build what there, in most cases, in a lot of cases, what there is existing today on the ground. Basically, the zoning calls for less density than what was built typically in the 70s and 80s when there was more compact single-family homes built, especially if you're, we're mostly, R40, especially in the Plains neighborhood where you have a lot of homes built on even like quarter-acre lots, and now you need almost an acre to build a lot there or to build a house there. So, that's just one example. Also, like I always come back to like the Maple Street neighborhood, that area where there's I forget the existing zone for that, but it's you need more square footage than what exists there today to be able to build there, and it's hard. And so this is a goal of basically saying if there are, we're not saying I think a next step would be to look at how many vacant lots there truly are that are kind of blocked by the existing zoning. But I think if you look around just on an aerial, or if you drive around, there are some instances where there are vacant lots that can't be built on now, but a property owner could, if we adjusted the zoning to match what's there today, could build something that's perfectly within the character of the existing neighborhood by adjusting the zoning that way. And so we're not talking about necessarily like increasing the density drastically. It's really just about adjusting the zoning so that you can build what is there today. So that's the goal of kind of simplifying the zoning districts. And also I think we have some suggestions for the for the setbacks and other dimensional regulations.
And if I can add, just to frame it in terms of the housing production plan, this is definitely like in line with the recommendation, like specific recommendations made there as well. So if you, in table 14 of that plan, there is specifically the directive to update, modify existing affordable housing regulations, including additional density as of right, and removing specific special permit requirements. And then it also mentions the need to evaluate options to allow affordable or modestly priced units on non-conforming lots. So this is on page 61 and 62 of that report. And then this additionally draws from recommendations from the EPA, essential smart growth fixes for urban and suburban zoning codes, specifically geared towards communities like ours and that are trying to increase resiliency through smart growth. One of the recommendations made there is change the minimum lot size, requiring smaller parcels to be aggregated or developed in conjunction with larger parcels in a coordinated manner. So those were like two of the big like expert recommendations that we're drawing from and the plan that Easthampton has already approved to sort of shape these recommendations. And what's included in the report, like what Ben said, is that we have a ton of pre-existing non-conforming lots that are far below the current requirement, and the data sort of proves that out. So yeah.
So I think all of the recommendations are on page 34. Is that kind of the summary, Kayam, of what we were recommending? There's a lot of like data in here about things non-conforming. Right. Yep.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to walk through those just for the public?
Sure. Do you want me to do it, or one of you want to do it? On page 34.
Go for it.
All right. So on page 34, the recommendation is to modify table 6-1, table of area regulations. The recommendation is to simplify the 6 distinct residential zones into 3 zone types that roughly adhere to the typical dimensions of the lots within the zoning districts that they would replace. The recommendation is to combine R5 and R10 into an urban residential zone, RU, based on the existing R5 zone. This would better reflect the existing land use pattern in those districts, and in line with the housing production plan, we would propose reducing the area set requirements for multifamily dwellings with 3 or fewer units and reducing setback requirements for low density residential units. Little fast. I know, sorry, you're I'm just reading it from the report.
Take a breath.
Yeah. Additionally, recommend combining R15, R35, and R40 into a suburban residential zone, which would be RSU. It's based on the existing R15. And then revising R80 into a rural residential zone, RR, based on the existing R40 zone. I think if you look at the table on page 35, that kind of is the recommendations in the table.
Any questions from counselors?
The highlighted, so I'm looking at the table. Are the highlighted things, things that are changed, but like for example, the RSU looks like the frontage is 80 feet. Was that previously 100, and so it's highlighted now that it's 80?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll also note that the numbers to the frontage, like that is all relatively arbitrary, and we were sort of, we came to this with the understanding that this would be more of something that planning board or like specific numbers would be chosen beyond this.
So this is the starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the starting point is based on the underlying zoning of the lowest level of zoning. So this, in this case, for RSU would be R50.
Yes.
So I have a question. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the changes correctly, since my precinct is in the plain.
Sorry.
Oops, sorry. So precinct 5, which covers the plains. I know you had said before that the amount of space that is between the road and the homes in the front are too short according to our current guidelines. Correct? That there are a lot of them that are currently out of alignment because we don't have the setback that our ordinance says. Correct?
And they're too long.
Right. What we have on paper is too long compared to what we have. So my question is, with this new ordinance, I mean, not these new ordinance, but these new guidelines, would that make all of that in compliance again? Or would those just be grandfathered in as we know these are unusual compared to the rest of the city?
I mean, I think the goal, and sorry if someone else started talking.
Go
I
ahead.
think the goal was to bring as many properties into compliance or a lot more properties back into compliance as possible. Because like while pre-existing nonconformity is allowed to continue, it can be really complicated for people to make modifications, or like if someone wants to build a shed or build something permanent on their lot, it can create issues with non-conforming structures. So this would hopefully bring a lot more of those back into conformity and allow for some greater flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just give an example, Councilor Smith, since I live in precinct 5, I live on Pomeroy Street, public record, so I don't mind sharing it. I live in one of the newer houses. So like that whole row of Pomeroy Street, all of those houses are on 1 acre lots. If you look across the street, all of the houses across the street from me are on much smaller lots. There are still lots on Pomeroy Street that are not currently for sale. But if we were able to change the zoning there, then those additional lots, should they come up for sale, you could actually build smaller houses on a smaller lot, and potentially instead of building 2 more houses, maybe could build 4 more houses. And then they potentially, hopefully, the goal is that hopefully then prices would come down, right? So if you're not spending, I don't even know how much a lot is now, but $175,000 a lot plus building a big house on a big lot. If you could build 4 houses or 2 houses, just potentially new construction could then mirror more what's currently been built there rather than looking out of place.
Okay.
Also, Derby, not to put you on the spot, although
Feel
I'm
free.
somewhat putting you on the spot. Can you provide any historical context by chance if you were a part of any of the kind of zoning context of what we're looking at, and why was it set at these kind of?
So, I mean, we've made adjustments over the years, but basically when we adopted zoning, these tables of uses were basically taken from, model zoning ordinances around the state and basically adopted by Easthampton. So if you look at ours, while, I mean, they're relatively outdated, you'll find similarities across the state because, I mean, that's just the way it was done. So we have made some changes over the years, but, we haven't really touched the, really modifying the R5, R10, R15, we haven't really done that since the zoning was adopted. So, I mean, that's, I guess, I hope that that's right. I believe that it is.
And not to put our planning director on the spot, but I saw you nodding your head. So is this pretty contextually, just for the public, is this pretty standard across the state that we've done it this way? And
yeah, I was really nodding to the, model bylaw. Like if you look at that's why the terms are so frequently the same across various cities, is the planning commissions, the regional planning commissions often do release model bylaws. It looks like our current zoning ordinance was adopted in 1995. I don't know the history of the zoning in Easthampton and how far back it goes, but definitely in the 90s, there were a lot of model bylaws circulating that this would have been drawn from. And the numbers themselves do vary by community, but not by much. Like this is pretty standard.
And may I ask you another question, just in terms of kind of current practice, way people are thinking about the future, with your kind of professional networks, is there discussion or of shifting these things in terms of lot sizes and things like that, that we're just, maybe we're not going in the right direction and we need to rethink some of these?
Yeah, there was a lot of upzoning that happened, I think, not only in Massachusetts, but just throughout New England. And obviously it happened here, you know, you see that in the plains, that the lots are mostly non-conforming because they were upzoned, that district was. And there's a lot of, yes, there's a lot of talk about infill is usually the term that's thrown around. Those few lots that do exist in between that currently aren't buildable, making them buildable again and bringing things back down to the actual scale of the neighborhood is absolutely becoming more and more important as we're in this housing crisis. What it does is it also helps steer away from like large swaths of open space. If you're focusing on the infill, which is more sustainable in all kinds of ways. The infrastructure is already in the streets. When you're looking at neighborhoods that have been built out, you're not, you know, it's not adding linear feet to the sewer and water systems that the city has to then maintain over time. It's just it's a better practice.
And can I ask just one more question? Like, what is you said better practice, like, what is the benefit like to the city? Like, can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, so if the goal is to increase the amount of housing, which obviously not everybody agrees about whether that is the goal, but I think the goal of this document is to increase the supply of housing that's available and its affordability on all levels. The benefit is that, again, you're staying away from taking away from undeveloped, undisturbed land while also still adding units to the count. And again, the whole, for the city especially, subdivisions, although the developer fronts the cost of constructing them, the city does typically take over responsibility for maintaining those long term. And like I said, sewer, water, pavement, sidewalks, everything, it all costs money to maintain. If you're building on a street that already has all of that infrastructure in place, you're getting the benefit of more housing without the added expense.
Good. Thank
I
you.
would just add that, you know, also using properties to their highest level of use is also a financial benefit to the city. Because an empty lot is going to have a very different tax rate than a lot with a house on it that's being used. And I think it would also, you know, potentially, so there's a financial benefit there. But I think there's also a benefit as it relates to our schools and hopefully bringing more young families into the city that have children that are school age, just because we do have declining enrollment at our schools. So that's another piece that I think is important.
So if I understand, or I can apply that to what Jana was just talking about, instead of having 2 families, right, you could have 4 families with a more affordable house, right? Because it could be a first-time home buyer house or whatever, their first home, they have a small family, they can afford it, and they're putting their kids in our school.
Paying taxes.
Oh, and paying taxes. I forgot about that.
I'd like to forget about it, but
Great. Other questions? Comments?
so I'm gonna go back to where I was before, which is, I think, you know, we have a couple, like, as far as R35, I see the benefit of this in a lot of different places in the city, specifically in our, you know, R5, R10 neighborhoods. Really important to be able to get those lots used to their highest use. In R35, my only, and I've said this before, but I just want to make sure that I keep saying it so it doesn't fall off the radar, is having tracts of land that are wildlife corridors have some sort of protection, because I can see potentially, if we decrease frontage if we adjust a lot of these numbers, then it might be much more attractive to someone who owns like a swath that comes from Nonotuck Park that, you know, is also goes over to Broad Brook and to the mountain, and then, you know, is going to cross over by Mountain View School to the woods that go to the bike path, which then cross over to Southampton. Like that's one of the main corridors there, where an animal can go from the Mount Tom area all the way to the woods of West Hampton. And I would hate to see those be high density developments because, and so what I'm thinking and what I'd love to do is I'd love to do this not in just like a haphazard way, but to say, we know that there's wildlife habitat migration or whatever movement GIS stuff, because I remember seeing it. I know it exists. And look at those and say, all right, so how many lots are on these areas? Do we do a wildlife, overlay for those particular areas? So we can change the zoning, but in those specific areas, it's a wildlife overlay, which kind of restricts and maybe keeps it a little bit more restrictive. So those we can think about keeping those open space strategically. Because I don't want to, I don't want to do things that aren't strategic. I don't want to just say, no, we can't do this because there's wildlife, but I also don't want to not protect our wildlife because that's an important piece of our city, I think. So if we can strategically figure that out, I think that would be helpful for me at least.
Mhm.
To,
Well, and animals.
and animals, yeah, animals.
Well, R35 is interesting, right? Because that's the slope of Mount Tom behind East Street. And so that's where there's been at least a couple times since I've lived here where there's been a large development proposed and everybody scrambles to protect the land.
Yeah.
So it feels like now would be the time to really think about what does the city want on R35? Because if
Right.
the city doesn't want houses up on that slope, then now would be the time to change the zoning to not allow the houses to be built there.
Right.
Right, so the part where there were like gonna be 12 units and now it's the trail,
Yep.
that was a big
That
scramble.
was a big one. Yep.
And when we first moved here, there was another situation and there are a couple big houses up there, but I mean, now would be the time if the city doesn't want subdivisions up there.
Yeah,
Then we should
protect it.
protect it now while we're doing this work.
Which I think, from my perspective, I think that makes sense.
Sure. So,
'Cause it's also,
And if I can also just add, just for the public record, when we're looking at the table, like this is superseded by the zoning overlay ordinance, like the aquifer protection overlay ordinance that limits the impervious surface to 15% of the lot. And like Councilor Divery, you were saying, adding a wildlife overlay district would then add an additional like restriction protecting or setting limits to development that are specific to that reason. So I just want to say that because when we're talking about combining all these districts, like it definitely scares a lot of people. But then when you are thinking about the overall zoning strategy that the city has employed with overlay districts and everything, like it starts getting a more accurate picture, I think.
Yep, that sounds good.
I was happy to.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I would add as well, like, I think zoning can play a role in protecting wildlife corridors, certainly, but I think I would be curious to know like who owns a lot of these large swaths of land, and are some of them protected farmland already, or some of them protected conservation land already? Or is it like really a matter of like buying people out of their land and, placing easements on it and stuff like that? I think that would be the more permanent long-term solution. I think that would be a really important goal for the city, certainly. But that being said, I think, if it is like, I'm trying to look, it's a mix of large swaths of big lots, but also some smaller lots. So like if we want to protect the larger swaths of land, I feel like placing easements would be a good way to go about it. But then for the smaller lots, like maybe limiting density could work on those. areas.
And I think, I mean, there's not that much open space in
Yeah.
the city right now. So it wouldn't actually be hard to sit
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
and to actually look at that with some, intention, and
Yeah.
and that could be an interesting exercise just to, to see what are the different strategies we could use.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
maybe that's something I can take on with planning.
Counselor Smith?
So I think one of the things that I have the most problems with in my visioning this is actually reflected in the pictures on the report on page 32 and page 33. So on page 32 is Morin Drive in the Plains, and that feels like a high density neighborhood when you're in it. There's a lot of people who have cars. There's a lot of people who park on the road. And so I'm trying to imagine what that would look like with having people having the ability. I know we're not on this part right now, but this is what I really want to talk about. So imagining these very small houses being turned into a double residency. I don't see how that could happen in this house unless it became such a small living area for one family to be living in that it would be really difficult. And then in the same precinct and in the same neighborhood, we also have, and well, Holly Circle is a little bit, but we do have the other new development in the same neighborhood that does have these really big houses with the really big lawns. And so from a inequality standpoint, just already our neighborhood feels, and Jenna, nothing personal to you, but walking down, I feel bad for the people who live on the other side of the road because all of this new development makes that just look like it needs updating a lot more. And so now when I imagine the people who live in these really big houses are probably not the ones who would need the extra income from trying to have more people living in it. And so I'm just trying to imagine it from a structural, inequality perspective through the whole neighborhood. I see that it's going to become a lot more dense in the place that's already comparatively dense, whereas the ones that have really well manicured lawns and really big huge houses, those aren't going to be the houses that turn into the solution for this. And so that's what I'm having a hard time with, is that I think that would be hard for just a lot of reasons. I think my kids just living in Easthampton, there's already so much income disparity in schools. And I just feel like this is going to create even more of that. And so I'm really having a hard time seeing how this would actually play out in the neighborhood in the peaceful way that you imagine it would. And because these houses are so much more close together and because they're so close to the road comparatively, imagining having a lot of construction starting on various houses within the same small part is a very different feel and a very different imposition to the people living there versus these larger lots where you have more space to get away from the noise and everything. And so I think that is a problem that I see as a real problem coming up with Precinct 5. And as I've been looking at I'm just listening to all what you're talking about and everything with the size and the lots and everything, but to now be putting partials away that we're going to save for wildlife, but at the same time with where the humans are, creating double capacity for that. It's just hard for me to imagine that being something that would be desirable in the whole neighborhood as the response to the housing issue. And so I'm really having a hard time with how to explain that in a way that these things wouldn't happen as a result of it. And I know my perspective is different from yours because I'm a sociologist, so I would take that larger step back. But that's my really big fear about these plans. And I know your perspective is affordable housing and creating more affordable housing, and I understand that. But just when we're actually talking about how that would come down, I'm just having a harder time seeing it. And you can already see on Warren Drive, for example, we have a few houses within that neighborhood because every single house there is a ranch house in almost the same exact cookie cutter fashion. And then you'll have every now and then another house build another level up. And so in that case, I could be like, oh, maybe they have someone there. But it's really hard for me to envision these really, really small residences being doubled. And I just don't know what to do with that. And I know it's uncomfortable to think about that and to say that out loud, but it's the reality that to imagine that we're going to be able to just double that and not have a lot of conflict within the neighborhood and within neighborhoods because of what that would mean. I can't see how quickly this would roll out. And I guess in the worst case scenario, if we were to be going into a recession, and a lot of people thinking we're going to be going into a recession, having a lot of people at the same time suddenly say they're going to do this now. If they can get a loan now, they're going to do this now. And so then we have a huge amount of construction at the same time, and what that would look like for this smaller contained neighborhood versus the bigger ones. And yeah, it's just, yeah.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So when you say double,
Yep.
double it, I'm guess I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about.
Oh, if you look at the picture on 32,
Two? Yeah.
mhm, the third house down, when people,
It's like a salt box.
mhm. But when people build in the plains, if they're adding on to their house, they tend to go up. And so any house that has additional space would go up.
Mhm.
So then,
So this first house, if we're looking at this first house on the corner, you're saying that would go up.
It would-
no, I'm saying what is being proposed is that this house on the corner could become a double occupancy residence, right?
So that you're like the duplex by right.
Right.
Duplex by
Right, and
right.
I know that's
Double it,
jumping
duplex.
back.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, now
All
I
of this is
understand.
making me think of that, and I'm sorry, again, I'm out of order with
No,
the
no,
rest of it, but
You're good.
But, and it would have, I think, the same dimensional requirements. So, right, it would have to go up.
mhm.
You couldn't go out because
Right.
we would be talking about the same dimensional requirements as a single family.
But to
That's what I was trying to understand.
build this into a double family, are you saying that they would have to build double into it, or that they could take this existing house, which is like a typical 3-bedroom ranch, and divide the space inside of it to become a 2-family?
Well, they would have to have enough kitchens and bathrooms,
Uh-huh.
and it would have to meet the Board of Health requirement. So I guess theoretically,
Yeah, I was gonna say, and they can do that now with the ADU bylaw, I'm pretty sure.
Mhm.
So,
and they
like,
can do it now by special permit, I would think.
right, yeah.
Not a
Um,
duplex.
Not
not a
a
duplex,
that-
but
not in that district.
But they could put a second level on with just the building permit.
yeah,
They wouldn't need, if they wanted to put a second level on, they wouldn't have to necessarily do anything but get a building permit.
Well, and if I could also give an anecdote, because I live like on Jones Drive, which is like right off of Morin. So like I definitely hear what you're saying, Councilor Smith, in terms of like the dense feeling of the neighborhood. Like to me, it feels like the perfect density in terms of I feel like I have a very large yard, but at the same time, like I feel close enough to my neighbors where like we can see each other when we're getting out of our cars and whatever. And it feels like friendly in that way, which I like. I like that the house is like not super set back up against the lot. But I think what you're noticing about some of the houses like building up is a product of sort of what we're trying to change. Like I think if the dimensional regulations as they are now, where like the setbacks are not going to move and like the house can't come forward on the lot at all, it can't move into the backyard because maybe the lot is too narrow and that inflicts on the side setbacks, which is the case. Like if Max and I wanted to put an addition on our house, we would have to make something really weird and triangle shaped in order for it to not like, because of the shape of our lot and like how it's set back on our neighbors. So like the only way that would make sense would to be builds directly up in the same footprint as our house. And I think that like what we're trying to do with the duplex by right, but then with these dimensional changes in tandem, is to allow a little bit of breathing room in those setbacks and frontage requirements to allow, like, if someone wanted to build a duplex or turn their house into a duplex or add an addition to better fit the needs of their family, they could, without running into, you know, requiring a variance or like a more involved zoning process. But that's just sort of my thinking. But I definitely hear the concern, and like I think that there's a lot. There is a lot of thinking these scenarios through of like how could these actually have an impact on the ground in the neighborhoods. So I appreciate the perspective.
But also add to the entire Plains neighborhood is in this aquifer protection district too. So we're still talking about it's very limited how much people can. That's probably another reason why people are building up, because of the limitation on impervious surface.
Yeah, and I guess that's part of it too, is that as a resident living in the Plains, I don't know if it's just an urban myth or what, but like I was always told that the reason that the houses are so small and the lots are so big was to deliberately decrease the footprint. I don't know if that's why it happened, like predates me being in Easthampton, but it does really create this, like I said, all of the extra land is in the back. So like in the front, our neighborhood looks like it's really high density because everything is so pushed up to the street. And if you haven't really been in the Plains as a neighborhood, this is kind of hard to describe. But this way, it's like what, I don't know, 20 feet. I don't know. I have a really hard time.
When you say this way, do you mean to the
Side to
side of the
side.
house? Okay.
Yeah.
thank you.
They're extremely close to each other that way. It's behind them that everything goes out. And so I just wish that design hadn't happened in the first place. It's just really awkward to imagine building into it. And I still don't, yeah. And I, you know, I'm keeping in mind everything that you said in last meeting of like, we definitely have an existing bias of what we think neighborhoods would look like and everything else, and structurally, and I understand all of that. It's just imagining it happening on the ground and how that would actually look. I really have a really hard time envisioning that part. So I appreciate being heard on that point. And it's just one of those questions that just we need to consider. Yeah.
Well, and if the Aquifer Protection Committee can come next time, I think that would be important to ask them, like those questions.
Yeah.
Is this why the neighborhood looks like it does? Because I think that will help inform us of whether or not we should make any changes in the district.
Now I'll bring out the list of people who have told me that. We'll get to the source.
So you're the one who brought this. Other questions, comments? See you looking at a map.
I'm looking at the protection area, actually, sole source area.
Mhm.
So that does.
I mean, the other thing I'll just say, Counselor Smith, to your concerns, and I share your concerns about inequity. But this doesn't mean that everybody's going to do it, right? So this just gives us some, if we move forward with it, it gives us some more tools in our toolbox, and maybe 2 houses in the entire Plains decide to do something like this. It just gives people more opportunity.
Yeah, I think I'll just reiterate too that I also feel your concerns, but folks can basically do this now with the ADU bylaw by right. So it's not like there's been, I don't know, I'd be curious to know how many ADUs there are in the city overall, but especially in that district. There hasn't been a flood of people doubling up necessarily, but it just does give folks the flexibility of their aging parents need to move in and have their own unit or something like that, you know, or a kid move in or something like that. So.
Right. I think it's
A little bit, it's early.
okay.
So I have a question then. So hypothetically, and I don't know the answer. So if I'm looking again at this house on the corner on Warren Drive, right? By right, I have, I can put an ADU on there. But does this in any way encourage one building option over another?
I guess one question I would have is the ADU has a minimum size, I think.
Max.
Max? Oh, maximum. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
As a minimum size, you can build it.
But, so ADU is the maximum, so it
It's really interesting. Apparently the cat was upset by my question. Well, go ahead, sorry.
no, I got it wrong. I thought it was a minimum size. So yeah, I guess I don't know necessarily.
Mhm. And the reason why I'm asking, right, like, does it encourage building up, right, as opposed to adding on an ADU in the back potentially?
I mean, I don't know, are there building requirements for additions that set similar like aesthetic qualities to that like an ADU is subject to?
Can you repeat that question?
I guess I'm curious, like if in a normal addition, like if you're just adding on to your house, if it's subject to the same like aesthetic restrictions or requirements that like an ADU is, whereas like an ADU has to look like the building and it can't like stick out or look different or whatever. Like I'm just wondering if someone is creating or turning their house into a duplex and making a little addition to one side, are they subject to the same requirements?
There's more flexibility with ADUs.
Oh, okay.
With ADUs?
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember if we,
Like setbacks wise, I'm talking.
did we put aesthetic?
Oh.
Did we put aesthetic? I should know.
I don't know, did we?
So with the state's new legislation and regulations, I don't believe aesthetics is a
'Cause
consideration.
I feel like when we were considering ADUs, like one of the things we were considering if like if someone had a barn on their property, that they could turn that into an ADU. So, and that wouldn't fall under any sort of aesthetic. I feel like we didn't put aesthetic, but I could be wrong. I don't think we
No,
did.
it's
But there's definitely dimensional requirements for sure.
yeah, but there's more dimensional flexibility written into our accessory dwelling unit regulations for that type of addition versus,
It's just a regular addition.
in order to encourage them.
Yeah, it does seem like it would be cheaper to, I mean, it'd still, I think, be quite expensive, but to put an addition on top, because you're not digging for plumbing, you're not, right,
Pouring a
or
foundation.
you're not pouring it, everything's, all that stuff is already there. I would still think it would be rather costly to take your roof off and put another whole floor on, but yeah, you would save on like the foundation, plumbing and all the electric, everything you'd have to like dig into your yard, I would assume, for an ADU.
I would imagine too, like if you have a small confined space, it's easier to build a ADU, whereas if you're coming into a vacant lot and you can build a duplex that's, two 1,200 square foot units, top and bottom or something, that might be a better choice than.
Right.
I mean, you're not
Limiting,
working with the
yeah.
existing
Right.
constraints of
Right.
what's built.
Other questions? Sarah's comments? Yeah, no?
Yeah, my thing just keeps making me enter my fingerprint to the thing.
You have another, you were looking at something, do you have another comment?
Nope. I'm good.
Does your committee have any other comments, reflections? No, okay. All right.
Yeah, I guess just to also reiterate, like this is a recommendation, starting point to kind of reiterate what Kayam said, like obviously this is all up for debate and like should be considered. And, you know, some of these are just numbers we put down. So.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think that this is a starting point, right? And I think that some things within the city, going back to your comments about wildlife corridors and things like that, at some time in the future, someone may bring a suggestion or do something. And so here's an opportunity to be able to think right now strategically, how do we protect, how do we include, how do we, you know, expand, or how do we constrain some kind of ways of how we want the city to be, right? So, great. So what I would like to do is, can we find a couple of times, I would like to invite the Aquifer Protection Committee to kind of weigh in on their thoughts regarding this, and you know, discuss those kind of concerns, if any, that we might want to address or bring up, right? So I know school is ending for some, and probably vacations, and you know.
I just get back, so.
Oh, well, okay. So, what do folks have?
My
just
classes
start-
end on the 6th.
Huh?
My classes end on the 6th.
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah.
Like May 6th?
Yeah.
I think we end on the 16th. I
I'm
think.
really jealous. Oh. Yeah.
We can talk about that in another meeting that we can have.
Yeah, I mean, like Tuesdays in May, I'm pretty open, so.
Okay.
I think the 6th, I have, we're changing our public safety meeting from tomorrow to the 6th.
Mhm.
So I don't.
That's also
think I'm-
next week. We have 2 meetings this week, so maybe.
Yeah,
just
so
a break.
maybe like 13th potentially.
There's a finance
Yeah, I'm good
committee.
with
There's
the
a finance budget meeting.
Oh, right. Oh, I forgot that's the week of the budget. Have the 14th is budget, but
13th is the budget too. The
20th. Tuesday.
20th, that's a finance budget meeting. As is the 19th. The 20, I have a bees committee meeting on the 22nd. I'm gonna be away from the 25th to the 5th.
Of June.
The 12th? Nope, there's a city council finance meeting.
Yeah.
How about Saturday morning?
Hey. That's one step
Allison
too
didn't
far.
think that was funny.
I mean, if I can bring my kid,
Yeah.
if somebody wants to play with her.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do the 22nd, but that's, I have a bees meeting that night. too.
We have our rain barrel distribution.
Oh, that's right, that's on that.
All of that should be over.
So we can hop into June.
Yep.
So I've got June 9th free, I've got June 10th free,
Yep, June 10th is free for me.
and what about the 9th?
9th is free.
All right, so can we tentatively say June 9th and June 10th? Can we just hold them? And then I will reach out to the Aquifer Commission or Protection.
I'll be out of town, but I'll definitely be able to join remotely. But that's the 1 week I'll be out of town.
So 5:30, 6 o'clock,
6.
5 o'clock? I mean, now that you have.
Oh, God. I mean, fine, I can be flexible, so.
Okay.
Whatever's.
All right, I just want to see what other people can do, and I.
If
wanna
it's
be
the
flexible.
Monday though, we have faculty meetings.
Okay.
That might go, they usually go to 5:15.
Okay, so I will say June 9th at 6 and June 10th at 5. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, so I will reach out to them to get those times, and then I will let you all know. I will try to get conference room 1. So we're not in this large room again, which be helpful. Okay, so I will email them tomorrow, and then hopefully we'll hear back from them. Okay. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.